A little preamble to this one. So you had a phone call with President Biden in September, and I filed an ATIP request to get the briefing note you were used for that phone call. And lo and behold, I got it today, 180 days after I asked for it, which is in complete violation of all the entire access to information timeline. So for those officials here, your access to information system is broken. One thing in that briefing note that was interesting, though, was it did say that this whole issue of irregular migration is something you and President Biden and Vice President Harris have been talking about for at least a year and a half. So it's been something on both your countries' radar. So I'm interested to hear your assessment then of what you think the final Los Angeles declaration looks like, what do you make of President Biden's work on this issue? Is there more that could be done in your sense? And why, of course, it's important for Canada. What do you think about this declaration?
Obviously, Canada and the United States have been engaged in discussions around welcoming refugees, around regular migration for a long time, because it's something that matters to us and that we work collaboratively on. But what was really important with the work done this week and leading up to this week was the opening of a conversation with hemispheric partners. Because we know that the solution can't just be more regular migration. The best solution would be, yes, continue accepting refugees and immigrants, of course, but also making sure that that's a choice people have, not one that they're forced into, leaving their home, their families, their communities because they're scared for their lives, because there are no economic prospects for their kids, because they live in a dictatorship, not a free society where they can free to be who they are. These are the kinds of things that we've been digging into over the past 3 or 4 days. And it won't surprise you, David, but there are no easy answers on this. This is a deep, complex problem that, quite frankly, adds itself to a range of problems around the world, whether it's the rising costs of living that families at home in Canada, but all across the hemisphere are facing, for food, for fuel, whether it's the challenge of more and more extreme weather events, or the health consequences of the pandemic and microbial resistance. These are things that are hitting communities across the hemisphere and indeed around the global south extremely hard. And they are all things that we need to work on together, and that's what this week has been all about.
And then I want to ask about one of your priorities since you became Prime Minister, and one of the priorities of this summit, and that's climate change. I'm sure you met with many leaders of island nations, and it's really tough to listen to them because it is an existential issue for them. And they're really looking for help from G7 leaders, wealthier countries. And I wonder how you feel that this summit made progress in addressing that, understanding that, and maybe if you can take a look forward to, you're going to hear this again at Francophonie with all the Pacific Islands as well.
First of all, there was a lot of discussion about this at the summit, some of the strongest voices being Mia Motley, as always, from Barbados, but others as well. Prime Minister Motley and I are actually working together as co-chairs of the SDG Advocates Group for the UN, pushing, amongst other things, climate resilience and reaching our Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Over the past number of years, however, I've worked closely with Andrew Holness of Jamaica on the question of development financing and of making sure that we're there to support vulnerable middle-income countries that often don't qualify for much international aid because they are middle income and yet remain extraordinarily vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, to the impacts of the pandemic on their tourism industries, to the impacts of pandemics as a health crisis on fragile health systems. These countries, which are technically middle income, are going to need more help because every time a hurricane hits, when this pandemic hits, they have to go further and further into debt to solve problems that they didn't create, and that interfere with their ability to actually build stability and a future for many of their citizens. So as a world, we should want our middle-income neighbors to succeed. And that's why the discussions around international financial institutions, around concessional financing, around de-risking that is having a negative impact on many of these small island developing states and our friends in the Caribbean, was very much a topic of a lot of hard work over the course of the past few days, and will continue, yes, at the Francophonie at the Commonwealth in a few weeks, and in other opportunities that we have to engage in serious discussions with neighbors and friends who may seem far away, but the pandemic and climate change have underlined for all of us just how small the world is and how what happens elsewhere matters deeply, not just to us as governments, but to our citizens. And that's why we have to remember more than ever before to be there for each other for the sake of us all.
Merci. Mr. Simi-Fana. Oh, Mr. Simi-Fana from House of Commons. Thank you. That concludes this.
Could I ask a quick question?
Okay, go ahead.
Very quickly about the Dave Graham report, the migrant declaration. A few countries who are here didn't sign up to it. Can you tell us something about why they were not happy to sign up to that declaration?
Those are questions you'll have to ask the countries involved. For us, the question, the important issue around migration was making sure that we're including robust conversations with partners throughout the region. We need to know that this isn't just a North American receiving of migrants challenge, it's a challenge of investing to make sure that we're partnering on building more safety, stability, security, opportunity in those countries. And we're very, very pleased to see so many people lift up their hands, but also roll up their sleeves to tackle this issue together. Yes.
Thank you.